Greetings everyone. I am Omkaar Pattanayak, the founder and president of the Global Federal League. Today we are honored to have amongst us Mrs. Rita Kakati-Shah. Rita Kakati-Shah is an honoree of the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award from US President Joe Biden and the founder and CEO of UMA, Empowering Confidence, Resilience and Leadership in Women and Minorities, an award-winning gender, diversity, inclusion and career strategist, speaker as well as an author. Rita began her professional career at Goldman Sachs in London, where she was awarded the Excellence in Citizenship and Diversity Award. She is an advisor and founding member of Democracy Without Borders India, a distinguished alumna of King's College London, and serves on the Advisory Council of King's Business School. She is also the author of The Goddess of Go-Getting, that's scheduled for its launch on the 8th of March on the occasion of International Women's Day. It's a great honor to have you with us, ma'am, today, and my heartiest congratulations on the award and on the release of the book.
Thank you so much, Omkar. It's such a pleasure to be here.
That being said, we'll start with the first question. When did you decide to engage with civil societies and join the field of activism?
So here's the thing. I think a natural part of who I am in my life is because, and that's what I do for a living. So when I was a very young girl, my parents, they came from Assam, Northeast India, and they settled in the UK. And everything they did was about giving back to society. Everything they did was about acknowledging where you come from and the people. My dad was a doctor. So by very virtue of his profession, it was about civic, it was about society, it was about giving back. So my younger brother and I, we grew up with that very notion in mind. So that really, to answer your question, is from childhood, really, ever since I could remember or ever since I could walk.
That's great to know. So would it be right to say that that's something that passed down through your parents and you're taking it forward?
Yeah, I think so. I think with these sort of things that it's either something that happens in your formative years, it might be something in school, it might be a belief you build over time that strengthens that need, which is what happened with me, with the causes that I now very much am attached to. But it very much started with my parents and my upbringing.
That's great. And how did you become a world federalist? And according to you, what would be the definition of the idea?
You know, that's a great question. And I think over the years, there's been so many different versions I've heard. The way I look at it is if there is shared causes that the world shares, for example, the air we breathe, the water that we have around us, that is a shared world issue. So anything that looks at that jointly is a world federalist issue. So when we talk about the gases in the air, climate change, when we talk about the trees, we talk about the oxygen levels, we talk about pollution in the ocean, that to me is a world federalist issue. And so that's how I see it. But I very much see that every country, every government, every nation has their own small body that looks after certain parts of it. So they have their own personal responsibility to take care of certain sections of it.
This is a question on your personal life, as you stated that you were born in London and your parents were from Assam and you currently work in the US. So how has the cosmopolitan upbringing impacted your work? And have you faced any challenges ever for your origin?
Gosh, I think my whole life there have been challenges that happened. And I think who I am today is a direct shaping of my upbringing because of where I've been around the world as well. I'll give you a little example. So when I first, I was in the UK and we were living in a nice little neighborhood, but it was a very white neighborhood. And but when you're children, I was 3, 4, 5 years old, you don't learn to judge by color, nor do your friends. And I had some really, really lovely friends, but sometimes the families, the parents of the friends are living in an area, and this was 80s racist Britain, as it was called back then, and for reason that people saw people from a different background as being different to them. It wasn't their comfort zone. I was different, my family were different because we stood out. The irony, though, was that my dad was their doctors. So that's how everything kind of came back together afterwards. But I remember at school, there were times where I'd be best friends with my friends, and other times they would say racist comments to me. I would be confused, and I don't think they even understood what they were saying. They were just told to say, or they heard it at home the night before by their own parents. So they just repeated what they heard. So initially, did it hurt? I think it did. Yes, it did. But also when you get over that and then you have common ground and you play, then you realize that actually it's not something that these kids have inherently to themselves. And our friendship actually shone that. So for me, friendship is very strong. People are very strong in that human connection that we have naturally as well. I'll give you another example linked to your question. So when we talk about, I just spoke about color, white versus brown. I'll give you another example. So my family from Assam, and at the weekends, my parents, my mom, she signed me up to do Bharatanatyam, so the dance forms from South India. And I learned that from a very young age onwards. So during the week where I was the darkest person in the room, now fast forward to the weekends, all of a sudden I was now the fairest person in the room, because traditionally Dravidian folks from South India are slightly darker skin toned. And then similarly, these friends wouldn't talk to me. They would just leave me out, where I would sit with them, the teacher would put us all together, classes would happen, and then they would just all go together, and that was it. So then I was left thinking, where do I belong? I felt out of place during the week, Monday to Friday, and then at the weekend, I also felt out of place. So over time, these things happen, and then you start to learn to fit in more. I think anyone who comes from a minority background, to answer your question, Omkar, has got almost some sort of a shielding around them. And minority isn't just color, it's not just race. It could be if you were the lesser of anyone, you could be the one meat eater in a vegetarian room. You could be the one vegetarian in a meat eating room. You could be the one religious person in a room of atheists, or the one Christian in a room full of Hindus. Whatever it is, when you are that minority, you build a certain shell of acceptance and try to fit in with somebody else. So I did that from a very young age. And I think as a result of that, the work I do and the way I think is very empathetic. So I naturally always put myself in somebody else's shoes because of virtue of my upbringing and what I went through when I was younger.
I would absolutely agree. And I believe it's not like just about everybody has faced this issue sometime or the other in their lives. Even in India, it's not just like all the people are similar, and people speaking one language face discrimination when they visit another state. And so that is sort of a global issue. And it's great to know how you have adapted that, and how that has inculcated empathy, because what I have seen in a lot of people is that sort of fuels the hatred, and that sort of sows the seeds for the hatred further, and people continue, and that passes down the generations. So
absolutely. What you said is so right. So one thing I do for a living and I believe in is empowerment. And that's very different to entitlement. So what you've just described, when you feel empowered, I say, yes, that is an inner strength. I call it the inner goddess of Goethe, the inner goddess Uma that is inside all of us. That's why I call the company what I did. But that comes from listening and understanding others first. Empathy is the root of being empowered. Because once you understand others, once you have that understanding, then you can feel strong and confident in yourself. Entitlement, on the other hand, is where you suddenly think, okay, I have a viewpoint. I'm entitled to that viewpoint. I'm going to go it, and I don't care what anyone else says. Now, I've exaggerated the example just to show the point, but it's really, you can still have your voice. You can still show your strength. But what's wrong with listening to others first? And I think to your point, exactly what you said, Omkar, there's so much hatred or fighting in the world because we want to put our own viewpoint first without looking at others. Nobody's saying stand down on your view. No one's saying change who you are. All we're saying is listen to others, look at their viewpoint, have some empathy for others first.
Appreciate who you are and appreciate who others are. Live and let live.
Exactly.
That I'll move on to a few questions on women. Women have historically played an indispensable role in the movement for a democratic federation. I believe we had Lola Maverick Lloyd, who was one of the pioneers of the World Federalist movement, and we had the Montreux seminar where all of them convened. Do you still think women have the same impact currently?
That's a really, really good question when we talk about feminism and women's role in the world. And this is always going to be an issue. It's not one of those things that we switch and then next International Women's Day, there's nothing to worry about. This is going to be an issue. Why? Because when you have different genders, when you have differences of any type, we've talked about race just now, we've talked about cultural differences. It's the same with gender as well. There will always be differences because we are physically different. But here's the thing, how you convey that difference, what you do with that knowledge is the decider. When we think about the feminist movement, so I like to think of myself as feminist, but I like to think of myself as an old school feminist, not a new school feminist. What I mean by that is an old school feminist is basically having more on gender equality, which is what I believe in. meaning that, you know, if you feel that there is an opportunity out there, you should be given the equal opportunity as your male counterparts or someone who identifies differently to you, right? And you should respect each other. And there are also things, and acknowledge that, you know, maybe I'm not as physically strong as my male counterpart over there. And you know what, I'm going to work with him and I'm going to ask him to help me out over there and lift that for me while I do this over here. So you work together. You're not saying I'm weak because I'm a woman, I can't lift that. It's a very different notion. What I found with feminism today, the way it's conveyed, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just an observation, is that it's very much about, and again, I'm going to exaggerate to give you the example. It's very much about, okay, we have men and women. Men are bad, women are good. Let's bash our male colleagues to show women are stronger. And it's almost that, again, that same sort of hatred thing, rather than acknowledging that we live together, we should bond together. It's almost like a yin and yang, you know, sort of what we work together on. It's almost like them or us, me or him, her or him over there, you know, they or us, you know, whatever it is. It's something that is quite divisive. And that's unfortunately happening in the modern world, not just against gender, it comes to race and other things as well. So that's the way I see it. And I think that everybody, all of us have a role to play. You know, in history, yes, we come up for that. But remember, that's just one perception. If you look further into the history books, you'll see different points of view as well. And I think we need to acknowledge that each of us has a part to play, no matter what our gender is, in this movement.
I would absolutely agree with that. And just like a question on that, I'll maybe have a follow-up on the feminism part as well. Nowadays, we're coming up with another term that's called being a feminazi. So how would you distinguish between a feminist and a feminazi?
So just what I said. So the modern day feminism is a bit like the latter term you've just used, the feminazi. It's basically where you're so hell-bent on a certain viewpoint, and you're bringing that viewpoint together that everybody does exactly what you want them to, in a sort of like a social kind of communist sort of way, which is, you know, bringing everyone together, but just following one suit and nothing else. That's just an expression. Again, there will be many, many more, I promise you, over the years. But ultimately, what this movement should be doing, in my opinion, is trying to provide that platform to have that equality for all. You know, it doesn't mean you have to do exactly the same thing. It just means you have the same opportunities as your colleagues and your counterparts there.
What's the current status of Democracy Without Borders India, and who are the incumbent office bearers?
So Democracy Without Borders is very much fully pledged, setting up in India right now. We have a set of bylaws together. We've about to go through the registration process. And the team right now, so we have, and I'll give you the names. So we have Dr. Achuja Samanta, and he's our founding president. So we have also Dr. Varun Sutra, he's our founding secretary. And then we have the founding members. So we have Dr. Lenin Raghuvanshi, and we have Miss Nikita Arya, and we have myself. So the 6 of us are the founding body right now, Democracy Without Borders. And it really is an add-on to the original Democracy Without Borders located in Germany, which is more of a global movement, where we really believe in the We the People's movement, where we're trying to get everybody together as a global think tank, as a global citizen, to really think about what is the influence that the world citizen has, you know, thinking about how do we get together a UN parliamentary assembly where all of the countries, all of the citizens can actually have that equal say in what happens, as well as the civil society as well. So that's just a little snapshot of what we're working on right now.
And like that sounds very encouraging, and I personally look forward to having Democracy Without Borders in India. And coming to the people who are currently involved, the founding members, that's a really very inspirational group of people involved. Like starting, could you tell us a bit about each of them?
So because of the pandemic, I've met Varun in person, but other than Varun, the others, we have WhatsApp calls, we kind of meet each other together. Everybody in their own right is an influential member of society. They've done great things. They believe in the ultimate notion of that global citizenship, of that sort of bringing all the people together. So Achuja Samanta, he's a philanthropist. I think many people know he's involved in the political arena, but also very, very generous with his initiatives, with education, particularly with some of the tribal folks, bringing them together for education under one. We have the KIT institutes there. Varun Sutra, similarly, he's also involved in that project as well. And he's works in media, he works across the political landscape, and also very influential in that spectrum as well of education. And I know that Nikita also works with both of them in doing that. Lenin, I've not actually met in person myself, but I know the others have. And again, I think he's a very influential sphere in the space. All of us have different pockets of, come from different backgrounds, and all have different sort of areas that are very much connected and linked to the same process and goal, but we all bring with us different expertises.
Yeah, and with that, I would say that I would like to just reveal that I personally am a student of KIT International School, which is a part of the KIT group of institutions. So
amazing.
Dr. Achyuta Samant is a very well-known personality over here in my state, Orissa, and Dr. Lenin Raghuvanshi, I believe he is a very prominent Dalit rights activist. And yeah, he's a supporter of the South Asian Federalist ideas to unite India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan and other countries as a pathway to world federation. So some really inspirational people, and I'm looking forward to having democracy without borders functional in India and the activities in future.
Amazing. Well, I'm glad. I hope, we'll keep you posted on that. And this is all done under the leadership of Andreas Brummel, who is our executive director of the global Democracy Without Borders. So he's really sort of leading this whole initiative and shaping it forward.
Best of luck with that. And I'm very excited about this, to be honest.
It is exciting, yes.
And this is, in my opinion, a very great time to be a part of the movement when we are seeing a shift towards the youth, when we are seeing a lot of things happening, like we are expanding to new countries, we are sort of coming up with new perspectives of the idea, and that's great.
Absolutely.
How would you as a world federalist perceive the geopolitical situation in Ukraine?
Oh, so that is current, that is going on now. So here's my thing, my comment really about anything geopolitical is that it exists around the world. It has always existed. Anytime you have any geographical border, there will always be some sort of an issue. There's a fight for space, there's a fight for kingdom, everywhere, within continents. You look around the world right now, there's always an issue about that. So I would say like now, this is something very, very current. It's very sad. The state is going on. The world is now coming together to help the people, because ultimately it is the people of Ukraine that are suffering. Take politics out of it for now. Remember, at the end of the day, what is politics? You're setting up policies, you're trying to protect your people. But when politics forget about protecting the people and it becomes about egos, that's when you sort of remove yourself and you think, okay, what's going on here? Think about the people. It's the people that are suffering. And it's not just the Ukrainians that are suffering. The students over there, look, students from India right there, we just had an unfortunate, somebody killed only this morning in Ukraine right now. And it's affecting the citizens. It's also affecting Russians as well. People are thinking, Russia are the enemy. The politics, the leaders are what's causing this. The people are trying to, as much as everyone else, have the empathy and trying to sort it as well. So I think don't forget that we are all one people. We're just located in different geographies right now, and the people are suffering. So this is what happens anytime there's a border, anytime there's anything geopolitical about this is ultimately the people that it affects. And this is now what our utmost priority should be, to how do you protect and save the people? How do we get them to asylum? How do we stop the conflict right now?
Absolutely. A question on feminism again. So do you think that feminism is largely influenced by westernization, or do we have an oriental perspective of the idea as well?
You know what, feminism has always been around the world. So there is a big movement that really does stem from the West. There are different hashtags, there are movements, whether it's Me Too, whether it's hashtag Time Is Up. These things do tend to stem from the West, but then they kind of migrate and shape themselves in the East as well. But don't forget, feminism has always existed in the East as well. I've noticed one thing that, coming from an Indian heritage, you have a lot of Indian states which are very patriarchal in nature. So naturally, feminism is a natural course to arise there. But then you have the Seven Sisters, the Eastern states, where I'm from, Assam, which are traditionally matriarchal. And if you look at the old sort of stones sculptures and drawings from really, really old textbooks, going back to the 14th, 13th century, even before that. You look at who the warriors are, and you look at the detail, there's actually women fighting there and beating off different folks and coming up against, the Ahoms are coming up against the Mongols, or, trying to fight for their right. It's actually the women doing it. And I think that in itself is a depiction of strength. We call that feminism now, but that's not feminism. That's just you protecting your family. And there was less of a divide in gender of who's going to protect your family in certain parts of the world. So I think it's really phraseology, how we come to think about it. But this has always happened. Ultimately, you're looking at yourself, you're protecting. People have gender roles because they think it's easier for society. But ultimately, what is it about? It's about bringing people together. It's about having your strength and showing that you exist and you mean business and you are protecting your family, your immediate folks around you.
Yeah, and the matriarchy, I won't say matriarchy exactly, because if you go by phraseology, that would mean something different. I would say the women empowerment that we have observed in the Northeast, that's always fascinated Indian historians. And as a student of sociology, as a student of culture and society, we have a lot of examples quoted from there.
I can imagine, yeah, it's a huge, rich bed of examples for studies, absolutely.
In fact, if we even move towards southern India, we have the Nair women in Kerala. We have had Rani Lakshmi Bai. We have had people, a lot of freedom fighters were women. So
yeah,
I think so. It's all about bringing up those stories instead of letting them get lost in the pages of
exactly. And you know what? We have International Women's Day coming up, but this is Women's History Month. The month of March traditionally is that, and this is perfect to bring up those stories. I tell everyone around me, you have a story, you knew someone historical, bring it up. This is the time to do it, because this is what gets forgotten when these books get written. These don't often make it to the books. It's up to us to bring these stories up now.